Well, hello everyone. So nice to have you joining us here again for week 2 in our Parenting in Real Life course here at Commons Church. So thrilled to be able to offer this in this sort of space where we know you're out there, you're living your lives. Some of you are parenting right now. And to sort of come to you and be available and to have these conversations. Again, we know that parenting isn't for the faint of heart. We know that the work of it is exhilarating some days, and some days you kind of want a day off. And that's maybe why we wanted to step into that space and maybe create some meaningful conversation and engagement. I have a couple of pieces before I introduce our practitioner and speaker for tonight. I wanted to just remind everyone who's registered for the course, but then also those of you who might be tuning in via our live stream and are sort of connecting with us live in this space, that we've created a landing page for the course. You can go to commons.church/courses/parenting. And there we're going to be putting up all sort of the links for the live stream so that you can watch whenever you need to come back. That's also where we're going to place any sort of extra tools and resources that emerge, whether those are provided by our practitioners or those that sort of come up in conversation. I think this is likely to happen over the life of the course. There are always more tools and resources, and so we're going to try to do our best to make those available on that page. So again, make sure you check that out, commons.church/courses/parenting. And you can sort of track with us for the next few weeks there and then resource it in the days going forward. I think I then want to just, again, welcome you to our conversation tonight. We're going to be talking a little bit about boundaries and technology and media. We live in a really interesting time to be a parent and to be navigating these questions. And we're so happy to have Jen Betts with us. You started a business, what we call, or what you call, the Calgary Institute of Counseling. How long ago did you start that?
I started that 4.5 years ago, January 2020.
All right, so just before the world went upside down.
Yes.
What a great thing. And I think maybe what we'll do is why don't you tell us a little bit about that, and if you want to give us a sense of how you came to the work that you do. And then I think you're going to give us a sense of how you come to any parenting knowledge and experience you might have. Go ahead and start there, and then you're going to sort of lead us in a bit of a conversation tonight.
Yeah,
super
absolutely.
Excited.
And so, like Scott said, I'm the owner of the Calgary Institute of Counseling. What we do at the Calgary Institute of Counseling is we are available for pretty much any age. We do counseling with some 3-year-olds. 3-year-olds is a little tough. We work more with the parents usually. And then people in their 80s. So we do individual counseling. We do family counseling. A lot of time now it's with adult children is what it is. We do assessments. We do couples counseling. We have an anger management group. We do pretty much everything there. I have 18 different psychologists at the agency. And we just really want to change the world. We want to support people. I got into this business because I was working at a nonprofit here in Calgary, and I was just handing out clothes and food hampers, and that wasn't changing anything for anybody in those difficult situations. And so I really wanted to bring a change, and so I became a psychologist, and I opened the agency because I myself have struggled with mental health, and I've seen a variety of different psychologists, and they have not been helpful and have said some pretty unprofessional things to me. And so at this agency, I have a very high standard. I have a very high bar because psychologists carry a lot of power. And I ensure that my psychologists are under supervision, that they are involved in trainings every month, all of that, because being a psychologist is a big deal, and we want to help people. But like you said, tonight we're going to talk about social media, we're going to talk about boundaries and technologies with kids. I first want to say that I am not the best parent out there. We all struggle, like you said. It's not for the faint of heart. It is tough. And so sometimes I struggle as a parent, but as a psychologist, I have a lot of information that I want to share with everyone. When it comes to social media, I think it's one of the world's greatest challenges right now. Everyone has a device. Everyone's always on their device. It's a difficult thing, especially when it comes to kids and teens. Everyone wants a device nowadays. Even my 3-year-old, my 6-year-old at home, they want to watch a show on Mama's phone. Mama, can I have your phone? Can I watch a show? Right? They always want my phone because they see us with it. And so what happens with phones is they become really addictive. And we all know, like, we all get anxious if we don't have our phone near us, if we've lost our phone. We panic. Where's my phone? Where's my phone?
Say, is your phone on you right now?
No, my phone, I know where it is, though.
Okay.
I know where it is, right? If we don't know where our phone is, we get anxious. And that's because when we're scrolling, what's happening is it's releasing dopamine in our brain. Dopamine is known as kind of the addictive drug in the brain. We get it when we eat, when we drink, when we have sex, when we do drugs. Any of those activities, it releases dopamine in our brain. Same with scrolling through a phone. It's our pleasure, reward, kind of addictive center. So that's why, like, phones or devices or whatever they may be can be such a difficult thing for teens, for adults as well. And so we don't want to be consumed by this technology. What happens is we get trapped, especially teens, and we'll talk about the stats in a little bit. But nowadays, every single teen wants or needs a device, right? They need that smartphone. It's not just a want. They need it in order to connect with their friends. They need it in order to be popular. They need it to not be left out. And pretty much nowadays, every teen has one. I was driving my car in my neighborhood the other day, and there's a young boy who was riding his bicycle and was on his smartphone at the same time. And I was like, oh my goodness, if this kid doesn't look up, he's gonna hit me and I'm gonna hit him. Because nowadays, teens are on them constantly. And I have a stat about that later. And so it's a really, I'll say, kind of like touchy, sensitive subject, because what I hear in the counsel, or like what my counselors hear in the counseling room, is it's quite a battle between parents and teens, and parents and young children too, when it comes to devices, when it comes to watching TV, whatever it may be. And so there's a lot of research out there, and the guy that I like the most is Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. He is, in my opinion, the foremost expert in this field. He has been studying it long before it became popular to start talking about how harmful social media is, how harmful any kind of device is. And he wrote a book called The Anxious Generation. Absolutely phenomenal book. I recommend it to anyone. If you have kids, it just talks about what has happened since devices have come out. It talks about what has happened since social media has come out. So what Jonathan talks about is social media, devices, all of those, they're an experience blocker. And what happens is children and teens, and we forget this about teens, is they're programmed to play. Teens don't play much anymore. But what happens is that is how their brain becomes kind of wired to understand our world, is through play. But nowadays, we have devices. Nowadays, we have video games, Snapchat. I found out just the other day that Snapchat is the big thing, not Instagram for teens. I thought it was, but Snapchat is the big thing, right? So we have all these devices, and what's happening is it's blocking the experience of play. And so because it's blocking the experience of play, it's changing how kids and teens' brains are wired. And we'll talk about those stats in a minute of what's actually changing in their brains and things like that. I don't know if these stats are Canadian. I'm assuming they're American, that he talks about in his book. But right now, 95% of US teens are using social media. And so that shows us that pretty much every single teen out there is on social media.
And maybe we can just pause and think, well, just like what falls into the category. If we're going to talk specifically about media,
Yeah.
You're going to have major sort of social sites. You already mentioned Instagram. You have Facebook. You mentioned Snapchat, TikTok.
Yeah.
And then you have other platforms, sort of social sites, and I would assume, I've seen some data where some of the studies look at a gaming site like Roblox, where children sort of like interact with each other. And I'm just trying to think what I've got. YouTube is, I think, one of the number one. So, so again, saying that for the benefit of those who,
Yep.
you know, we can just talking about app-specific sort of outcomes or percentages, but to make sure we sort of have a really broad definition, like what is it that falls into the category of social media? I don't know if you have anything else that you'd add to that.
I don't have specific ones. I would say that's a very good umbrella that you've given, and that there's honestly probably more than you and I know that is popular with, 14-year-old boys, and I don't know as much about what 14-year-old boys like to view on social media. They're playing those games or whatever it may be, right? But that's a very good umbrella. And so it shows us, though, that kids are using devices. And we'll talk, like I said, here in a minute about what those devices do and what it's causing amongst children. So 95% is a pretty big number. And 33% of those teens that are using a device for some sort of entertainment or whatever it may be, 33% of those are using it constantly. And so that means they're using it in class, and to my surprise, I can't believe how kids are allowed to use those in class. Like, I had a teacher that used to whack your desk if you weren't paying attention, so things have obviously changed.
I think we're glad that maybe that doesesn't happen anymore.
I'm glad that doesn't happen.
Right, but yes, I've seen this data as well, especially with social networking sites. So you can be in class and you can be messaging your classmates.
Yes.
Which is, I think that's what the reference point for constant use. It's just referring to the way in which we stay in direct contact. And we're often interacting with others. It's not just consuming.
Yes.
It's like they're not watching videos during biology, but they might be messaging with their friend across the room during biology.
Yes, and we'll talk about why that is harmful in a bit, because it's known as the great interrupter is what it's known. Right. So if we look back, smartphones came out in 2007. That feels like ages ago. And when we look at college students, they started observing college students in 2010. So that means they would be maybe 2 years graduated, so they've been full on using smartphones, all that kind of stuff. Anxiety in those college students has gone up 134%. Depression has increased 106%. ADHD has increased 72%, and anorexia has increased 100%. And so you can see that there's a pretty sharp rise in those different disorders when smartphones came along. I don't remember growing up with as many people, I had childhood anxiety, absolutely I did, but I feel like there's more of it now, and I think that points to Jonathan's research, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is what highlights. It highlights that there's a very strong, and it continues. The longitudinal studies on this will continue to, I think, make it more and more clear that the increase in use has led to, or has a really strong correlation. It's not that any child who has anxiety, it's related to device use. That's not right.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
When we zoom out, this is certainly what we're looking at. Higher incidences over a 10-year period or over a 20-year period. It's directly related to the growing influence of device and app usage.
Exactly. Maybe a child that wouldn't have had anxiety back in the 80s, maybe they're more susceptible to it now because they're on their device more often or something like that. Absolutely. So for females, there's double the risk of self-harm, depression, anxiety, and suicide, especially among younger girls. And I say these stats there's more stats here, but I say these stats not to scare people, but in our agency, we are seeing young girls with self-harm. We are seeing teenagers that are attempting suicide. And I don't remember that happening when I was in high school, people attempting suicide. Self-harm wasn't a big thing. On TikTok, you can find videos on how to harm yourself. Those are very popular videos among teens nowadays, from what I hear in the I don't work with teens specifically, but I talk to my counselors and all that kind of stuff about what they're seeing. And self-harm it's a big thing, unfortunately, right now. 1 in 8, which is 13% of those social media users, aged 13 to 15, are going to have unwanted sexual advances. I follow and have donated to Paul Brandt's Not In My City. It's local charity that tries to stop human trafficking across Canada. And he's doing some pretty amazing things. And his post, I think it was today or yesterday, was about how groomers are trying to get young boys through video games online now. And so nowadays, it doesn't matter if it's male or female. There is going to be, unfortunately, through any, like we were talking about, there's an umbrella of social media, gaming or TikTok or whatever it may be. There are going to be instances of people trying to lure young boys and young girls. Again, I don't mean to say this to scare people. I don't. But this is what's happening through the use of social media. And I could be wrong, but I don't believe that it was happening. I graduated in '02, in case people are wondering what my age is. I don't believe that it was happening back then, that this degree of things was happening.
Yeah, I think that's generous. I think another way to sort of think about it is to also say that it's maybe less about the incidences as a comparative, and it's more to say that we don't always understand as parents the ways in which these applications or the use of these devices, the way it's playing out in our own children's lives and also in the children's lives that sort of surround them. It's less about, looking at a spike in numbers,
Yes.
at least for me.
Yep.
To your point about, it's not about trying to be fearful, it's about trying to be informed.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes that means we do have to look at what is clearly
Yep.
a significant change in the social fabric and network, and then especially when we see that impact that devices are having on that social network formation in younger populations.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and you didn't need to disclose your age. It's fine. It's okay.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Now people know my age. But like I was saying earlier, social media is known as the great distractor, is what it's known as. What's happening, and I think my mic is falling off.
Just take a moment.
There we go. We're good. Look at that. So what Jonathan talks about is social media is the great distractor. What's happening throughout the whole day, even if they're just messaging their friend across the room in science class or whatever it may be, they're getting notifications that are popping up all the time on their phone. And what's happening is they're distracted all of a sudden. Their attention is taken away from science class. Their attention is taken away from talking with their friend or talking with mom and dad or what it may be. As we know as adults, notifications are going off on our phone all the time. And it's distracting for us. Like my phone dings while we're at the supper table. Oh, what's going on, right? Like I own a business, so I need to sometimes know what's going on. But it's common use for all of us. If our phone dings, we want to grab it. And then we're distracted from what we were just doing. And that's the same thing with kids and teens. It's absolutely distracting them. It's distracting them from connecting with people. They're focused on kind of this world instead of the world that's going on out there. So this is some of the information that he recommends, is that during the day, kids should not have phones at school. He has a big movement that phones should be locked up at school or they should be locked up at home.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think there are a number of school boards. I don't know if it's happening here locally in Calgary, but I do know that there is, from educators, there's an increased, and there may be educators who are participating in the course that could speak to that this is a concern for educators. There's their job, their vocation, and their responsibility in this line of work is being greatly impacted by exactly what you're referencing. So I think this is something as parents that we're going to have to navigate. We're going to have to navigate the relationship between our teachers of our children, and as much as is possible to try to be allies in sort of navigating how so much of the research. I know my kids; they're all teenagers. They all do most of their research using internet and using devices. And so just knowing that's not going to change, but then how can I help the teachers? And I mean, this is part of like building good boundaries and structure to our lives anyway, which is what we're here to talk about. But it's an interesting point to just think that's something that's going to happen here for sure in the next decade.
But he very much says that phone should be locked up until the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah, so obviously we take every information with a grain of salt and we decide how we want to use it as parents, but that's his feedback, is that they should be locked up until the end of the day because you're just going to be distracted maybe good information for us too. He gives this analogy, and I've heard other people give this analogy, is that devices should never be used alone in the bedroom. What happens with the internet is you are unintentionally, your children or you, whoever it may be, are unintentionally inviting people into your home. And if someone that you don't know is coming into your child's phone in their bedroom, they're a person in your house that is now in your child's bedroom with a door closed or a door locked. And that is when dangerous stuff starts to happen. And so if you wouldn't allow a stranger into your kid's home, you shouldn't allow them to have a device, a laptop, whatever it may be, behind closed doors. Because that's where the difficult, I'm going to say a bit more dangerous stuff can start to happen. And so that's his information. And yeah.
I was just going to ask, and maybe we can come back to this, because I think I'd love to talk more about that as a way of assisting parents sort of participating, who are probably a wide range, like both children and then like some even young adults. And I guess that's why I was curious if height has a graduated scale. So
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
So he says, though, what I really appreciate about some of his research is he says, don't keep kids away from the internet. Like when we first found out about the internet, I remember I was in grade 7 and we got to go to the local school board and use the internet for the first time. And it was like unbelievable. Like the Titanic movie had just come out and I was like Googling all about the Titanic movie, and it was like super amazing, like super exciting. There's a lot of really good stuff on the internet. So he says, don't keep people away from the internet. Don't keep your kids away from there. There's a lot of good knowledge. There's a lot of good information, but you have to have boundaries around it. So there's nothing wrong with a desktop computer. There's nothing wrong with a laptop computer that the family uses out in public view. And yes, I know every 16 and 17-year-old person wants to have their device. And I totally can understand that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But maybe it's about making sure that they're having their device out in the family room where you can peer over their shoulder, just kind of monitor it. This is my word that I have with like my staff, having open and honest and validating conversations. So yes, your child is going to want to take their device into their bedroom, but let's both be open about how we feel. Let's both validate kind of how we're feeling and discuss how we're feeling, because we don't want those dangerous situations happening. I personally recommend charging kids' phones not in their bedroom, charging them in a parent's room. When it comes to giving a child a phone, like even like Haight will say that he has, there's even 5-year-olds that have smartphones, right? Maybe that's a little extreme because like, I don't know a 5-year-old that has a smartphone yet. But he recommends not giving a smartphone till age 16. I've read other research that says not until age 14. So everyone's kind of different, but it's about that age of 14 and 16 is when it's more okay and children are a bit more hopefully responsible and can have a better dialogue at age 16 about a smartphone. Now everyone's going to say, but what about my child when they need to get a hold of me? Then you can give them a flip phone. It's totally okay. They can text, they can call. And that's all that like a 12-year-old really needs. They don't need to be on Snapchat. They don't need to be on Instagram, anything like that. So you can give them a flip phone. This is what,
I didn't even know they still make them.
They do.
I mean, somebody needs to Google and sort of say like, where can I buy one of these?
You can buy them like at your local stores, things like that.
I was just going to say there are a number of companies, or at least I'm blanking on the name of the company that makes it looks like a smartphone and it has sort of limited capacity.
Yep.
And then maybe I'll just say something personally. One of the things that in our family, what we did is we basically had family controls on which apps, and we'll talk about controls, I'm sure, more. But it just meant that my kids weren't downloading things that I wasn't aware of, and it meant that we were doing exactly what you just said. We were having informed, and for the most part, engaged, thoughtful conversations with them as they sort of navigated the virtual world. Not just social media, which we can talk about, but just also gaming and watching videos on YouTube, that sort of thing. Anyway,
absolutely.
So
I'm loving this. I love the back and forth. And I know so many parents will say, but my 14-year-old, everyone who's 14 has a not a flip phone, but a smartphone. And yeah, a lot of them do. We don't want our child to be left out alone. We don't want them to be bullied because they don't have what everyone else has. And so what we need to do is we all need to start making this change. It's not just about like one parent making this change and they're the only kid in the classroom, but it's about us all coming together and saying, you know what? This is not okay. This isn't okay for our kids' brains. And that's Jonathan's big message is like, this is damaging our kids' brains. This is not okay anymore. We need to change something. And so it takes a community to make a change. And so maybe we can all come together on that.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, Chris has made a note here in the chat saying, observed that school boards are trying to maybe move towards addressing some of the challenge of distraction in education. But again, the note is that school boards aren't made up of just educators, and that it's exactly what you just said. It's and I kind of want to talk about this more, but maybe we'll come to it later. This idea that the individual actor, so me as a parent, I can shape my life and I can shape that of my child, but for me to impact sort of beyond the scope of my own home, I'm up against billions of dollars of research and the ways in which these devices and the applications are built to exploit our biological responses for gain. So I think you're exactly right that maybe we need to work together as much as we can, and maybe we'll talk about how to do it.
Yeah, remind me to talk about the idea of influence when we talk about boundaries, because that's a very good question. So it's not easy to navigate this at all, and I don't have teenagers, so I want to put that out there, that I have a 3 and a 6-year-old who very much want my phone, and I can't imagine what it's like to have a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who wants a phone, right? But this is where we start to have the conversation around boundaries. And it is up to every single parent. I'm not going to sit here and say, you can't let your kid have a phone until they're 16, whatever it may be. Everyone's going to make their own informed decision, right? This is why we come to parent nights. Obviously, you care a lot about your child if you're here tonight, and you're going to make an informed decision based on the information that we have here tonight. In order for us to create boundaries with our children, what we need is what we call a strong attachment with our child. At our agency, we do a lot of what's called attachment theory. Now, attachment theory is like when a baby is born, they want to have like a safe base. They want to know that they're safe. If I cry, will you hug me? If I cry, will you feed me? Will you rock me? Whatever it may be. So when we soothe a child, they start to have a safer attachment. Unfortunately, most people in this world don't develop a secure attachment with their parents. My children probably won't develop a secure attachment. They'll maybe have an anxious attachment, right? We do our absolute best as parents, but it's tough. So as our children get older, what happens is they want to go out and they want to explore the world, but they want to know that they can come back to this safe landing place. The world for children and teens can be somewhat of a frightening place. But when we come back, we have a safe place where mom and dad will take care of me, where mom and dad will validate how I feel, mom and dad will take care of my boo-boos, whatever it may be, they will make sure I am okay. Like my little boy will come home from daycare and say this boy didn't share with me, and I will validate that huge pain for him because sharing is his most difficult task. And for him, that is a big emotion. And so what we want to do is we want to create like a sense of security with our kids, especially when it comes to talking about boundaries. Our kids don't want to push, or our kids don't want to listen to boundaries. They want to push. My son is almost 4, and I had a meeting about, things that were going on for him and stuff at school today. And the educator said, when children turn 4, that's when the psychologist of the group told them, that's when their fight or flight kicks in. And man, is he pushing, right? He's wanting to push. but I can validate all his pushing, right? That is what matters. When we create a safe environment for children, they have predictability and they have consistency. They know that they are going to be safe and they're going to get what they need from mom and dad. That is what matters. It makes them feel less anxious in life. Even if they go out into a kind of anxiety-provoking situation, they know there's something safe back at home. And so that makes life predictable. It makes life consistent. It makes life safe, is what it does. Again, I'm not the perfect parent, and I'm sure everyone here isn't either. What we're aiming for, though, is 60% of the time. We're looking for consistency only 60%. You're hitting it out of the park if you're doing it 60% of the time. No parent, including myself, including like my clinical director at the agency, whoever it may be, can do it 100% of the time. Our emotions get in the way. It happens, right? We get triggered, whatever it may be. But what we want to do is we want to try as best as we can to be emotionally responsive. If you're only doing it 10% of the time, that's great. Let's move it up to 12. Whatever it may be. We just really want to be responsive to our kids' emotions. And what that does is that makes them feel secure, that makes them feel safe, and that helps with boundary making. So especially, let's look at social media. Let's look at devices. A 15-year-old girl is going to lose it if she can't have a smartphone. I would imagine, like I put myself in the spot of a 15-year-old girl. Everyone's has Snapchat. Everyone's taking pictures of themselves in their outfits, doing their makeup, doing their hair, whatever it may be, right? I'm too old to know what 15-year-old girls are doing, but that would be my guess, is what they're doing, right? They like to send snaps to each other, their pictures, their videos, right? All that kind of stuff. And so our job as parents is to set limits and to set boundaries. It is then the job of our child to figure out how they feel about those boundaries. We have different roles in a relationship. Our job, again, is to set that boundary. Their job is to figure out how they feel about it.
And would this be right too to say that it's also their role to then adapt and change and shift, like and in some cases, especially the older they are, to like push against those? Is that one of the things that would be normal?
I think it's normal for any teen to push. Children's brains, whatever, teens' brains, adult brains, they don't develop until they're 25. And so they don't have that executive functioning. They're full of emotion, but they don't have the executive functioning of like, okay, let's process this slowly. You don't get there until you're 25. And so an 18-year-old, a 17-year-old, they're going to push back against any kind of boundaries. Like we're talking about like, mom and dad, can I take the car out? Well, you can take the car out once you've done X, Y, and Z, and if you fill it up with gas. Whatever the boundary may be, right? They're going to push because that's what their job is as teens, is to push limits. So when we set those limits, though, like we were saying before, we want to have honest and validating conversations. The example that I have, and I thought of it last night, my daughter came home from school desperately wanting McDonald's, the poor girl. Like, she loves McDonald's. I did too as a young girl, loved it. And for some reason, it was on her mind. She had to have McDonald's last night. She had a full-fledged meltdown. She does not have meltdowns. She's very easygoing, but for some reason, she wanted McDonald's. So I had to set the boundary of, I'm so sorry, honey, we can't tonight. Mom has already cooked supper tonight. I already have some of it on the stove. We can't do it tonight, right? I'm setting that boundary. But she tried every tactic, pretty please with a cherry on top. She tried everything. And so I validated, I know this is sad for you. I know you are angry. I am so sorry that you feel this way. We can go in a few days, but we can't tonight. Pretty please, pretty please, pretty please. No, tonight we can't. That's how we set boundaries. We just keep repeating ourselves again and again. But we do so with validation. Because then we're creating that safe base where kids can express, no matter the age, a 17-year-old can still throw a fit over not being able to go out to the party or whatever, right? That sucks as a 17-year-old that your mom and dad won't let you go to the party that's happening at school that everyone's going to. That's not fun, not at all. But you can have an honest and validating conversation that says, I know those parents aren't going to be home, and I know that's not going to be a safe party for you. I know you're angry. You're allowed to be angry with me. I know you want to take your phone into your room tonight and have a video call with your girlfriend. I'm not okay with that. I know that makes you really mad. You can be as mad and say whatever you want. You can blame mom, tell your girlfriend that my mom was excellent at that. If you never ever need an escape, just say mom said I couldn't do it. Always blame it on mom. That was so helpful for me. And so we want to validate it. Their pain, like my son who wants the Red Bull and not the Blue Bull, but the Red Bull is dirty. He's 3 and his emotions are real that he can't have it. So boundary setting, the biggest thing is validation is what matters. And I want to say that we are going to screw up. Again, 60%. That is the pinnacle of perfection if we can get 60%. And no one is the pinnacle of perfection when it comes to parenting. But if we can create a safe place for their emotions, even when they're dysregulated, that's what matters. Now, here's the difficult piece. Our emotions are going to get in the way. We have to learn to become regulated ourselves. My kids trigger me in different ways. I'm sure your kids trigger you, right? But what matters is that we can take care of ourselves. I forget who, this is just coming to my mind now, and I forget whose analogy it is. I can maybe send it to you later who to credit this to. But she gives an airplane analogy. And so the airplane analogy is all of a sudden the plane is dipping. It's going down fast. And the pilot comes on and says, oh my goodness, like everybody put on your masks, we're gonna crash, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to do, we don't know what to do. And everyone panics, right? Or the pilot comes on and says, hey, I've got this. Don't worry about putting your seatbelt on. We're just gonna fly this plane, we're gonna land this bird, it's gonna be good. I've done this a million times, it doesn't matter, we're fine. Or a pilot that comes on and says, okay, everyone, I know how to do this. I've been trained in school. Please fasten your seatbelts. Please put your mask on for your safety. And we're going to take care of you here today. So we want to be that regulated parent when we're trying to set a boundary and saying, you can't snap your friends in your bedroom alone right now. I'm sorry. That's not okay. And they're going to get mad, and that's okay. Kids can get mad at parents. They're allowed to. They're not being disrespectful. Well, they may be disrespectful. They may be, right? Kids can be disrespectful. My 3 and 6-year-old can. But we need to be, there needs to be safety for them to allow them to express those emotions. They have no executive functioning. Their frontal lobe is not developed. Yeah, not developed at all. So we need to put our anger and frustration to the side. You can go scream in a pillow. I have. After, right? Whatever it may be, you take a time out. I take time outs as parents. I'll say to my husband, I need a break. I've had it. I need to go take time for myself. I don't want to yell. So then we go and we take time. But we ensure that we are the regulated ones, just like the regulated pilot. So we're not panicking and yelling and freaking out, or we're not too laissez-faire with their emotions. Kids' emotions matter when we're setting boundaries.
Can I just lean in right here? Again, I'm just going to say this for those who are watching live. We invite you as you're listening, if you come up with questions, to throw those in the live chat, because again, we'll come to a time here in just a few moments where we'll sort of field any of those questions and do our best to sort of respond to them. With that said, I wanted to just ask about the question of our job as parents to regulate, specifically when it comes to media and technology usage and device attachment. This is one of the things that I've seen pop up in the literature a lot is this encouragement to more or less, if you don't have boundaries with your own usage and your own practice, you're not likely to have much success in sort of encouraging your children in this. And I think that's something that, in addition to my own emotional regulation, I also need to be paying attention to what some specialists would say, what are the micro distractions in my own So how many times in a day with my children, regardless of their age, do they speak to me or try to address me and I'm unavailable because I'm either using a device, it might be while I'm working, and maybe we'll maybe talk about this, some of the strategies we can use in a sort of a family or in a home situation. But I just think that's
It's so
regulation is a
Yep.
big piece, but it's also, I think, more and more awareness for parents to say, well, what are my own practices? And how do those inform any and all boundaries that I would choose to try to encourage my children to use? Anyways,
Again, we come back to the idea of dopamine, right? Our phones are addictive. Unfortunately, Meta and all those social media companies, they make money off of this drug, right? And they make it more addictive and all that kind of stuff. So we do have to take a look at ourselves. Our children who are, older are going to say, but mom, but dad, you're on your phone all the time too. And so we have to be the example of what we want our kids to turn out like. And so that's an excellent point. Nope, that's okay. We're good. When it comes to working with children, when we start working on our parenting skills, I'll say, sometimes we start to realize, okay, I made a mistake here or I made a mistake there. Or my son asked me, can I, have my phone in my bedroom to talk to my girlfriend? I just want to have a private chat with her. Is that okay? And we lose it on them. No, you can't do that, because we get triggered from what we went through, or we get triggered because of we're so scared, or whatever. We get triggered. And so one of the most important skills as a parent is repair work. That's what matters, because like I was saying, we're not going to get it right 100% of the time. We're barely going to get it right 60% of the time. And so what we need to do is learn how to repair things with children. It's never too late to do repair work. What matters is, if we can, doing repair work when we have had a moment of like, oh shoot, I shouldn't have said that. We all have those moments. Maybe it's in that moment and we can repair right then. Maybe it's 10 minutes later, maybe it's 2 days later. It's never ever too late to repair things. The reason why repair work is so important is because what it does to that memory of the event with the child is it brings an emotional moment to that memory. It actually can kind of change how that child remembers that moment if we repair it. And so when we're setting boundaries around social media, we are going to make mistakes. Like you said, it matters about our own social media usage as well. And your 17-year-old is going to say, Mom, I see you talking to your friends all the time in your room. Why can't I? We're going to make mistakes. And so I think it's important to own our stuff as parents. It's not easy. We have shame that builds up, all those kinds of things. And so that's really difficult. But if we can repair our mistakes with our children, that changes the memory of that event. And so that's one of the most powerful things that I believe I can teach tonight. Is you're going to get it wrong. I get it wrong. Like my daughter the other day, I was like, I said to my husband, why did the numbers on my phone turn green? And my daughter said, because you work too much on it. And I was like, oh, that hurt, right? And so right in that moment, I was like, I'm so sorry, Mommy has been on it. That's not okay. Mommy's going to leave it over here, right? I run my business from my phone. It's not healthy, not helpful for my children, right? And so in that moment, I had to apologize because obviously I've taken something away from her, right? I'm not as readily available as she wanted in those moments. And so I had to repair that with her and help her understand that, yeah, I made mistakes in those moments. And so to kind of wrap up here, what we want to do is we want to check out the data. We want to see what's out there, what's happening. Oh, we were going to talk about influence. Let me talk about that for 1 second. When it comes to influence, the best way to have influence with your children is by having a secure attachment with them. And so, yes, every single 17-year-old, pretty much 95% of American kids are on social media somehow. So we're going to say pretty much most of them have some kind of smartphone. And so we want to have influence over our children. All the different apps on there are going to influence your children. They are. I promise you they are. They influence us. I buy my clothes off the internet, right? Like, I buy this supplement because this person told me to buy it. Whatever. They absolutely influence us. But it is possible for parents to have greater influence than some of the apps, some of the commercials, whatever they're seeing on social media. The way we do that is by having a secure attachment, by having open dialogues. And I try to have open dialogues with my children, right? Like, you don't like this? Kate, let's talk. How can we have a bit of a compromise here? It's a win-win situation. I'm going to win and you're going to win. It's not I'm going to win and you're going to lose, or vice versa. We want to have that honest, safe, validating conversation. When there is more of that secure base, children feel safe to tell their parents what they're thinking. And then they can work through it, and then you can have influence over your children. Mm-hmm. So there is a possibility of, you know what, I don't want you to download that app on your phone, because I know Snapchat, and I don't know all the apps out there that teens are using. I'll be honest, I'm not in the counseling room with children or teens. I work only with adults. But some of those apps are harmful, and you need to have open and honest conversations with your kids. And maybe you can have that influence and say, this is what's going on behind closed doors of Snapchat. Everything is kept, all those videos, all those pictures. Some of them might be inappropriate, whatever it may be. So I want you to be safe. And if they can banter back and forth and have their opinion validated, they're going to feel like, okay, I voiced my opinions, mom and dad voiced their opinions. Let's work on this together. Obviously, a 10-year-old can't get to that point quite, but older teens absolutely can get to that point. So what we want to do is we want to hold boundaries. We want to let our children figure out how they feel about those boundaries, especially around social media. It is tough, and we want to validate how angry they are, how sad they are. Obviously, we want children to try and be respectful, but they can be angry with us. Mm-hmm. We can create that safe place if we regulate our own emotions. And if we can't regulate our own emotions, I haven't, it happens, we repair. That's what changes the memory, that's what changes your relationship with your child, and then you can move forward and have those open and honest dialogues with your children. So that's kind of what we need to do.
Yeah. I'm just going to maybe jump in with a quick response, and then what I'm going to invite us to do is, if you do have sort of a question or comment, I'm going to invite you to throw that in. What I want to do with you, Jen, if you're game, is have a bit of a conversation about. I want to get pragmatic, and I realize you just acknowledged. You sort of said like the broader scope of the Institute practice. Like you personally work with adults, and I think you've offered us some really, again for me, just sitting here. I think I may have said something similar last week, that I sit here as sort of somebody like hosting the conversation, but I also sit here as a parent. And I find one of the things you said, this idea of the connection between any boundaries that we want to set, any boundary making we want to sort of offer to our children in any form, but specifically when it comes to navigating their relationship with technology and devices, it starts from a place of connection, to try to navigate any challenge we face, specifically in this area, from a place of asking how strong a connection do I have with the child that is causing me grief right now. Yep. I think that's super helpful. Because I think this is actually something that in my own reading and in my own sort of like desire to be a better parent, one of the things that I think lots of clinical practitioners are showing us is that they're showing us the strong need to address this challenge from sort of the relation, like trying to preserve the relationship.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to always end up with the behavioral outcomes that we want, what we want is we want to do everything we can to preserve the relationship we have with our child. And that's something that I think we all navigate. It changes over time, all right? Your children are a little younger than mine, and mine are effectively becoming young adults. And so I'm having to sort of shift and change. And I think that's a really important piece to acknowledge, specifically around the challenge of technology, how much it's changed even in the last 5 years. Not only is our relationship with our child going to change between when they're 5 and when they're 15, but the technologies that they're exposed to and that we have and bring into our own homes, that's changing. So I think the other piece that I really appreciated is this acknowledgement that not only will we not get our emotional regulation right, I mean, if we're doing it 60 to 70% of the time, we are nailing it.
Yep, absolutely.
But also the piece around navigating the pieces around media usage, gaming, social apps, and their impact on our family. Like, we probably aren't going to get it right all the time.
Not at all.
And to your point, then, this idea of being able to acknowledge the need for repair. This is just a really solid piece of parenting advice. And I know, for me, I sometimes am always focused on the outcomes around behavior. I want my kids to do what I want. And that doesn't always line up perfectly with their capacity to develop and to change on their own. And that tension isn't always something I enjoy. And I mean, that's probably something you experience when they're young, too. But
I think that's every parent. Like, we want our kids to behave. We want our kids to listen to us because we know what's right. We're adults. We've lived it, right? But we cannot have control over our kids. We can have influence over our kids, but we can't have control. Control is more authoritarian, right? What we want to be is more authoritative, which is strong boundaries with validation, with warmth, right? That's what we want to do. We want to have those strong boundaries, but we want to be warm with our kids. And so, like you said, we are going to get it wrong, and that's okay. But we can't control our children. No one can. And boy, do I wish I could. But there's no way that we can control them. But we can have influence over the decisions they are going to make.
That's right. And I think, so let's just do this as a thought experiment. Because Chris has asked in the chat recommendations for helping kids learn to control addictive behavior, specifically around screens, helping them manage. You've referenced, Chris manages, he's mentioned that the goal, ultimately, is to inform a set of skills in our children to being able to identify addictive behavior, because ultimately, just as you said, there's going to come a day when I have no control. When they're young, so I think this is actually an important piece around boundary making and technology and media usage. I think, I could be wrong, but I think the younger your children are, the stronger and clearer the recommendations from a clinical perspective are to limit usage.
Yes.
I'm happy to provide some of the resources I've used. Some of the tools that I've found really helpful are related to one of the greatest things you can do as a parent is to do what they say is co-watching. And I think, having not tried this a lot, but specifically the idea, first of all, to inform the connection that you might have with a child, so to watch things that they're interested in. One of the big pieces that I've run across is it's less about quantity of time. That's a lot of clinicians would say, obviously if your kid is staying up till all hours of the night, that's going to be a problem. But for Chris, to your point, if my child is maybe a little bit older and I'm trying to help them understand the addictive nature, what my goal should be is it's less about 4 hours, which coincidentally is what the average child uses a device outside of school, which is mind-boggling to me. 4
hours a day.
4 hours a day. Engaging social media, gaming, watching videos, streaming services. It's this really interesting to help them understand it's more about the quality of the time that they're sort of spending with those. So again, we've talked about our children are likely to be using the internet to do research. They are likely to be using it for social connection.
Yeah.
And I found this recommendation a number of years ago super helpful. Instead of losing my mind over what I thought was too much time, what I should be doing is spending more time thinking about what quality of viewing and what quality of connection are my kids experiencing? And then secondly, how can I be a co-conspirator? So if they're going to be watching material, this is one of the ways that you can stay informed in how your children, and it's all one of the for me, the invitation as a parent was if I want to do more co-watching, I don't actually want to watch that much. And so there's a natural boundary built in. But then if I do have watching behavior, like if I love watching and streaming, to try to build some more sort of collaborative experiences, this is one of the ways that you can step toward productive conversation about content for children of all ages. And is also, I think, one of the ways you can help create a conversation with a child who is watching a lot. And if you're asking them what they're watching, you're going to maybe be able to have a conversation about how some of that isn't super helpful. I don't know if any of that makes sense, but those are some like practical pieces.
I'm just going to add this. When it comes to addictive behaviors, and maybe you're wanting to curb your child or teen's use of the device, it's going to be hard at first because as adults know, we love the doom scroll or whatever it may be because it's addictive to our brain. Like it actually releases dopamine. We feel good when we can doom scroll. It's the same thing as like eating your favorite food or whatever it may be. And so it's going to be tough at the beginning if you start setting more boundaries around social media use, device use, whatever it may be, and you haven't had those boundaries. That's okay if you haven't had those boundaries. It's going to be tough in the beginning because they want that dopamine fix. They're addicted, and that's okay, right? It's a fact. Let's not put it good or bad. And so you're going to have to be patient with that child while they act out. Because they will. They're not getting their dopamine fix. It's one of the main ways that us humans, unfortunately, now get that dopamine fix. So maybe you go outside and play with them, and they get a dopamine rush another way, or whatever it may be. But it is going to be hard if there haven't been boundaries, and that's okay. We're all here to learn, right? If there haven't been boundaries around screen time, and you're starting to put boundaries, there's going to be a good pushback. So just be prepared for that. It's going to be tough, but again, honest and validating conversations.
Right, and then I think, and we already talked about this, to the question around how do I help children where I'm starting to see maybe there's overuse or over-attachment or addictive behavior. One of the big signs too for children of all ages, but especially the older, it's like, is it starting to impact sleep patterns?
Yes.
And is it starting to impact their capacity to take care of basic tasks? So that would be like basic hygiene, and so these are where I think a lot of clinicians would say these are signs that I need to take a more direct relationship.
Exactly.
So it's maybe I need to have a very clear conversation about what I observe, and I think it's interesting. Your invitation to do all of this work for the purpose of building connection as much as is possible. And what I think it does, at least for me, that inspires a little insecurity, Jen, to be honest, because if I realize that I don't feel particularly empowered to assert what I think is a boundary that would be best for my child because I don't maybe have the emotional connection or, and this is to Jonathan Haidt's work, one of the things he argues is that effectively what device usage has done is that it has allowed us to leave our children alone.
Yes.
And it allows us to be alone.
Yes.
And that's a big piece for us to acknowledge. And to me, that's where that insecurity comes from in me. My response is I say, I'm going to have to be more engaged and more intentional. And I have to start with my own relationship with my own device and my own usage. maybe I've got some other pragmatic pieces.
Yeah.
Are you game?
Yeah,
Just as
I'd love them.
we're getting close to the top of the hour. I went and looked. Because over the years we've used. I encourage all parents, and this would be recommended by both American Pediatrics practitioners, Canadian Pediatric Society, which is just like a group of practitioners who sort of make recommendations around media and technology. But they would suggest, like, if you're not using what we would call sort of a family or a home media plan, and again, you can Google this to see what that looks like, but the basic invitation for me in terms of if I'm a parent and I want to build some boundaries, is I need to have very clear guidelines around how and where media is used.
Yep.
And so
like it should not be in the bedroom.
It should. So
Never.
Yeah, this is a good recommendation. Now, not all parents will choose to do what Jen's suggesting, but there's an implied invitation, I would say, and that's this idea of space. That media, gaming, video watching, social engagement, there should be spaces in our homes that we choose to try to keep free of that kind of material, much like we wouldn't allow our kids to bring their friends over to every meal and sit at the table with us.
And friends we'd never met, right?
Right.
People we've never have come in contact
What's
with.
interesting, I think you're right, that we have a tendency to think about, like, what's the pernicious or the sort of like the harmful behavior. And certainly we want to avoid the forms of victimizing that can happen. But it's actually, I think, for me, I want to have a broader imagination. It's even just in our home, you can't sit in a public space and watch videos because it's antisocial behavior.
Yes.
Again, because our relationship is defined by honesty, openness, and interaction, and that kind of behavior. If you're sitting on a train with a bunch of people you don't know. There's not the same sort of social cost as there is in a place, an intimate space. And so I would argue that the more intimate space you're in, the less usage should happen in that space.
Yep.
Both for partners, but also for how we sort of teach and coach our kids how to use devices and where to use them. So, and again, to me, that's informed by some of the clinical work that's being done. Have a media plan, and some of that has to do with space and time.
And I would say, in those intimate spaces, if everybody is joining together, that is also one of the best places.
Right, co-watching.
Yep, exactly, co-watching. I don't want to watch my daughter's shows, but today she came home from school, wanted a snack, wanted to look at her tablet, and I said, in my mind, I have to practice what I preach. So I sat down with her watching this ridiculous show and got her to explain it to me, right? Like, I want to try and connect with her somehow. And so in those intimate spaces, we can try and connect, is what can happen.
That's great. And that's a good point. There are spaces where we can sort of collaborate. The only, I'll mention one more tool here. Oh yes, someone just recognizing, addressing our own habits as parents. This is a big piece. So to your point about dopamine awareness and paying attention, I would just, that's the encouragement, isn't it?
Yeah.
The first step is pay attention to your own use.
Just be aware. We can't ever change anything without awareness. Yeah. Don't judge yourself right now on your usage. Don't. It just does no harm, or it does nothing helpful to judge ourselves. Right. Take judgment off the table. Doesn't matter. Just be aware, and then you can say, oh, I'm aware that I'm on it most of the time when I'm around my kids. Yes, I'm talking to them, but I'm scrolling while I'm talking. So just be aware. Don't judge yourself. That doesn't help. Yep. And then you can decide from there where you want to take it.
Yeah. Because that's, I think, it's interesting. I think lots of us who might, also just what comes to mind is some of the statistics, major study done, 400,000 families in 4 different countries. More than half, I think it was 56% of the families in that particular study in 2022 cited that they have conflict around media usage once or more a week, which to me was just a sign like, hey, this conversation is so important, and also maybe you're in a place where you feel some tension with your own use, and you're feeling that tension with your kids. And to your point, the shame around that, we need to sort of try our best to put to the side and try to have an informed awareness of our own use, which is why I would say. I use Screen Time, sort of like an application on my phone. It tells me how much I use every week and what I'm looking at. I get the review. It actually pops up in my feed every Sunday when I come to church. It's hilarious. The two aren't synonymous, but anyway.
It works.
This is a great place, if you're not already using these, as a way to reflect to your children the usage that they actually, the usage that they're actually participating in. This is one of the first places to start. And then another one that clinicians often offer is parental controls. And we could talk about that at length.
Yes. Yeah.
The ways in which certain apps probably should be banned for certain ages of children.
Absolutely.
We're not going to go through that list. And actually, what I'm going to say is I think because this sort of pragmatic, practical application of some of these parenting suggestions, I think we'll probably put up maybe a resource guide that'll have some links to some studies. That's something that I think I'd be happy to provide, and maybe we can collaborate on that.
I have a resource list of, and this is going to sound silly, but that's okay. Different resources that you can go and look at, like different Instagram accounts to follow that are really helpful for parenting, or books to read, or things like that. So I'll provide that to you.
Yeah, you're going to need to use some more social media.
Yeah, you'll use a little bit of social media. Again, the internet's not bad, right?
Yeah.
There's good information. Yeah. We just have to be careful how we're consuming it, how we're letting our kids consume it. So yeah, I'll provide that to you.
Yeah, after. And I just because I think to do a breakdown, maybe what we can do is I'd like to provide some more of those practical suggestions and to give you sort of informed, a base of informed data by which you can start to make some of these choices for yourself. I'm just going to check here if there are questions. People are saying thank you. People are offering some, people are asking about parental control applications. Some of the best suggestions. I have a short list. There are a number of them. And also, I would suggest most phone manufacturers actually have a parental control function that you can use. If you're not already using that with your children on an iPad, on some sort of tablet, or on their phones, this is something that we've practiced for years. That's part of how we've tried to build some informed knowledge building in our own children, is to say, well, why can you not access those websites?
I've done that with my 6-year-old. She wants YouTube on her tablet. I let her for a little bit, and then she went down this path of some things, and I was like, oh, we are taking that off, right? And she was sad. It was her favorite thing to watch, but I had to explain why it wasn't okay. And then we put those controls on that. You can't ever download YouTube, right? So
Oscar is asking what the best sort of apps are. There are a number that you can use, and so we'll maybe I'll put that in. I think we're going to build a bit of a resource guide for this particular session, because I think there are so many practical pieces that we can sort of offer that we couldn't possibly talk about all of them. And Chris is just saying, using app specific for providers. There's strengths and drawbacks, but they are all free, which is great. And also, these are great suggestions. Thanks to all the parents who are chipping in with these suggestions, Karen. Sometimes your internet provider will also have a parental function. And this is what I would encourage you, all parents, regardless of what stage you're at in your level of, some parents don't feel like you really understand the technological world or the applications your kids are using. Some of it's built into the services that you, or who provides your internet service. And so just choosing to, build a bit of a boundary list from there, you can start right there. And maybe we'll build a little bit of a list for you to help you take next steps, because again, that's, I think, the challenge for us. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want to add before we sign off for tonight?
I just want to say again, I'm thankful for all the parents that are here, because obviously they care about their kids. And give yourself grace. It's not easy being a parent. If you knock it out of the park 40% of the time, you're doing great. And so give yourself grace. It's tough out there. Yeah, and these are big questions. And we're up against biology and the great big companies, but there are some really simple steps we can take. And so we look forward to providing some more resources there, and look forward to the coming weeks. Thanks so much for being here tonight. We will see you
next Tuesday.